How's this? Sound okay? Do I need to say anything else? Mary had a little lamb? Okay. Thank you, and good night.
Okay, do I go, oh, yes, yes. Okay, can you hear me? Do you want me to say more than I'm saying right now? Mary had a little lamb. Oh, Mary had a little lamb. Its fleece was white as snow. And everywhere, thank you.
Does anyone need a program? If so, raise your hand. Okay. Good evening, everybody. So glad to see all of you. Thank you for coming out for this wonderful event of storytelling. And there are a lot of work has gone into tonight. I want to thank everybody who's been behind the scenes, and especially Pastor Rebecca Anderson, who has worked with all the storytellers and formatting tonight. She has special training and experience in this kind of event. She actually learned from the moth itself, which I was impressed by that too, and I was so grateful she was willing to use her time that way with all of our storytellers. She is not with us for this particular event because she is with the Youth and Kids Connect, who are meeting at the same time, but she will be watching later in the recording. So thank you all for coming out. Thank you to all of our storytellers, not just for being here, but for following the call that you heard to share your story tonight. I know that we will all be blessed by it. I'm going to give a few more words of introduction, but first I'd like to open us with just a short word of prayer. Loving God, we thank you for this night. We thank you for all the stories that are in this room, all the stories who are with us online. We thank you for those who are taking the chance tonight to share their story of travel and transformation with us. We ask you to bless their voices, bless their hearts, and bless our ears and our spirits as we hear and listen to what they have to share. And may all truly be a part of your glory for us and through us. And it is in Christ that we pray. Amen. My name is Laura Sherwood. I'm the interim pastor here. I always forget to say that, so I wanted to make sure I said that. And we have another special pastor with us tonight. Well, we have more than one special pastor with us, but one who's been getting a lot of attention the last couple of days, Barbara Gorski over there. Yes. She just joined us yesterday and is already having a big and positive impact. And following tonight's storytelling event, we are having a special reception in the parlor. I've already seen the cookies, and trust me, you want to be there. That will be a time of refreshment, but also getting to speak more with each of our storytellers and to see Barbara. And I know a lot of you have been wanting to at least give her a hug as you greet her. So our theme tonight is transformational travel, journeys that changed our lives, or the journey that changed my life. And you are in for a real treat. Each story is unique to the storyteller. But I think as you listen, you will hear a common thread, or more than one common thread that weaves through all of them that goes even beyond the theme. I'm going to introduce each one before they take the stage. And I asked each one before the event, where is the last place you traveled to? So our first storyteller is Carolyn Nunley. And the last place she traveled to was here, from Aurora. I didn't realize until tonight, whenever she comes here to be with us, she's traveling from Aurora, which is a great gift to us. I've made that trip, and I appreciate the gift of that time, to get here to be with us. Carolyn is sharing a story titled Angels. And as she makes her way to the stage, let us give Carolyn a warm welcome.
My name, as you heard, is Carolyn. And I'd like to begin by thanking all of you and First Press for allowing me the privilege to share with you some of my story, some of my journey over the last 11, 12 years. As you saw, I'm blind. And that means, I hate to have to tell you that, but sometimes people don't understand the concept. That means I'm in the dark, and I am truly, almost totally in the dark. So I can't see any of you. So with that said, we're going to start our journey together by closing your eyes. If you can, if you will, and if you don't, I can't see you, so it's okay. I won't know. All right, is everybody ready? You comfortable? I'm going to ask you a question. Is it scary there in the dark? Because it can be. Little kids, even grown-ups, are scared of the dark. That's my world all the time. And I've been walking that way for only the last 12 years. Prior to 2011, I could see. I was born sighted. And I traveled like a sighted person and did things like sighted people do. I got an education, I got a job, I could drive anywhere I wanted to, anytime I wanted to. I had that luxury and freedom. I don't anymore. I have to do it a different way. So, I'm going to start this journey a little ways in. I had the opportunity back in 2015, 2016, to go to blind school, to learn how to get around on a blind cane, how to use technology, how to use a computer, how to use an iPhone, how to just do laundry, get dressed, organize yourself, because that's all different after you lose your sight. And while I was at blind school, I met a gentleman who was also blind and who was a diabetic who ended up getting an infection in his right leg and foot that turned into gangrene, and he eventually lost that foot, ankle, and lower leg. When that came up, while we were at blind school, I told him, I said, you don't have to go through this alone, because I'd been through surgeries on my eyes and woken up in a hospital in the dark, not knowing where I was or how to call on a call light. I said, you don't have to do that by yourself. And I said, I'll, come visit maybe on the weekends and see if, just for company, and see if you need anything. And whatever you need, I'll try and, find it and get it to you. So I had been traveling in and out to blind school from Aurora to the medical district down by U of I. And so I was comfortable getting on and off a train and kind of getting around. But obviously, I was used to where I was, we're like trained rats. We learn our environment, we memorize it, and then we stick to it. Otherwise, we're lost and we have to have help. So the first time I came up to visit, I was on a train. I had to come in by, this is my travel, was a Pace bus to the train station in Aurora, a Metro train into Union Station, a cab from Union Station to Ogilvie, which is just around the corner, but it was more than I could manage, and another train from Ogilvie to the Des Plaines station, because he was over at Alden in Des Plaines. And from there I had to take a cab to get there. So that was just getting there. The first time I got off the train in Des Plaines, I had help because the conductor, who I wanted to help me into the station, said, I can't do it. We don't have time for that. You got to get off the train. They don't stay long at station stops. I'm going, okay. But he did find somebody who was getting off, and they walked me in. But, I'm yappering. I'm not paying much attention. I'm not trying to memorize everything. The next time I went up, I got off that train by myself. No one else got off. And if you know that train station, inbound tracks one side, outbound tracks the other, 2 sets of tracks with a walkway in the middle. And you got to walk down that to the street, cross the tracks, and then walk back up. The station will be on your right. I'm going, ugh. And I'm pulling, a box or bag or something, that belongings, whatever. And so I'd walk, and I'd try and stay in the middle of the walkway, because blind people tend to veer a little to the left sometimes, a little to the right. And I didn't want to fall on tracks and get run over by a train. So I'd walk a few steps, and I'd listen for the traffic. And I'd walk a few steps, and I'd listen for the traffic that's getting closer and closer. And I'd walk some more, and I finally stopped because I was terrified. I could hear the traffic. I didn't want to walk in the street, so I was terrified. I lifted my cane to the heavens, and I said, God, I need help. And then I started walking a few more steps. And within that first few steps, I had a gentleman by the name of Kevin at my left hand, not my right, because that's my cane. He knew which side to get on. And his first words were, do you need help? I'm going, those are the last words out of my mouth, practically. And I said, yes, I need help. He goes, well, I was just coming out of the library to get some lunch. It's a kitty corner from the train station there. And I saw you. He saw me as I lifted my cane. He goes, it must be tough to be blind. I'm going, yeah. So I have a standing date with him if I ever get over there to the library. He said, come over and visit me anytime. But he got me into the train station. I got a cab. I got where I needed to go. The next time I came up, it was almost exactly the same, except this is how God works, at least with me. Do a little, much as you can, and then I got your back. I'll help you the rest of the way. And each time, he gets me a little bit further. So this time, he got me all the way to the street. And I knew it was at the street because, you know those little cutaways at the end of sidewalks and the little bumpy things on the platforms before you fall off the platform? That's for us. It's also for people in wheelchairs, originally. Those are called truncated domes, and they stop wheelchairs from just racing out into the traffic. For us, it tells us, oh, danger, danger. Step back because the street's right in front of you. So I found the truncated domes at the street. Click, 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 right in front of me. Click, 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 click. 90 degrees to my right. That's a set of tracks. 90 degrees to my left. Click, click, click is another set of tracks. That's the ones I had to cross to get to the station. So I turn, and now I'm going, do I step into the rails, or is there a walkway? I can't remember. Short-term memory loss. And I'm going, I don't want to turn my ankle and fall on the tracks, because I'd already done that on a mobility lesson, broken a leg in blind school. So I didn't want to do it again. And now I am really terrified. So I'm standing there, and I'm crying. Tears are everywhere. And I said, oh, God, I need your help. They didn't last 2 seconds. And I had a lady at my left hand. Her first words were, God, do you need help? And I'm going, yes, I do. And then I gave her a big hug and called her an angel, because that's what those two people had been. They were an answer, an immediate one, to a prayer. My prayer. And I had help. Now open your eyes. And I want you to look to your left and to your right. And maybe tonight when you go home in the mirror. Because God's angels are not those fluffy winged things like Michael was in the movie. John Travolta. I love that movie. They're everyone around you. And I'm living proof that prayers are answered immediately. And they're angels at your side. So you have no reason ever to fear your world or the darkness, because God's got your back.
Thank you.
Let's thank Carolyn again. Thank you, Carolyn. Our next storyteller is Kevin Kelly, and the last place he traveled to was Gilbertsville in Calvert City, Kentucky. He was there as part of our church's work trip, working with Presbyterian disaster assistance for communities that were devastated by tornadoes 2 years ago. He traveled with 7 other church members, including his wife, Carol, and they just returned on Friday. Let's give Kevin a warm welcome. He's going to share a story on my way home from work.
Carolyn, thank you very much for sharing. It gives us an idea how we can all be angels also. It was truly inspirational. Thank you. Mine was, I kind of got recruited last night, about 10 o'clock last night, to do this. And I wasn't sure if this was going to qualify or not, but Rebecca said it was 100%. I don't know if I believe her because she was in a bind, but transformational journey was on my way home from work. And I'll start a little bit how we all got started. My dad was an accountant. So one day when I was a sophomore in high school, I asked him, what does an accountant do? And he said, instead of telling me, he said, there's an accounting class at Prospect. That's where I went to high school. And I should take it to see if I liked the class. So I took accounting as a junior, and I loved it. I signed up for all the business classes my senior year and decided that accounting was going to be my college major. I was all pumped up and ready to go out in the world and be a CPA. My junior year at NIU, I realized accounting was not for me. The intermediate accounting book was this thick. And my ADD was kicking up every time I opened up that book. I said, I got to look at that, oh my gosh. But I still like business. I thought it was exciting, so I switched to marketing and graduated with a marketing degree. My first job out of college was I was a business analyst with Dun & Bradstreet. I'd go around different businesses in Chicago and talk to the owner and analyze their business, looking at their financial records and everything else. And after a year and a half, I felt no purpose to the job I was doing. I was making money for other people as well as myself, but I wasn't happy. So on my way home from work one day, the trip that changed my life, I saw the Prospect baseball team practicing. So I decided to stop by and say hi to my former baseball coach. I played ball at Prospect, and so I was very close with my coach. While talking to him, I noticed one of his players struggling with their hitting. So when I said something to my former coach, he told me, he says, "Go ahead and tell him." I said, "What do you mean, go ahead and tell him?" I had played in college, but I was kind of surprised that he said I should do this. And so I went over and told the hitter what he was doing wrong, and we made a connection. The hitter started hitting hard line drives and was very happy and comfortable with the adjustment I gave him. Not only was the player happy, but I felt really good too. I felt like I was doing something. I had a purpose here. Well, because of that, I made a couple more trips to the practices that season, and my former coach let me contribute in any way he saw fit, or I saw fit. I felt like I helped quite a few of the kids, and the feeling was the same for me, that I had found a purpose. This was my transformation. I was going to be a teacher. My former baseball coach and I researched what I'd have to do to become a teacher. So I went back to grad school, get certified, and get a master's in secondary education. I went back and I started teaching business classes, and my favorite class to teach was consumer education. I thought it was the most important class that kids could take when they were in high school. And I tried to teach them how to be responsible adults. Some people think consumer ed is a shopping class. It's far from it. It is a required class in Illinois. There are schools that try to step aside the requirement and do different things, but my idea was I was planning all my activities toward what the students would do immediately after high school, whether it was renting an apartment, reading over the lease, buying a used car, maintaining it, getting insurance, doing their taxes, investment strategies for an 18-year-old, managing credit and credit cards. These are all things we covered in my class. And many former students would contact me after high school to tell me how valuable the topics were that we covered in class, and they really felt like they learned something, and they were applying it everyday life. Again, I was receiving affirmations that I had made the right decision and gone into the right career. And after 35 years as a business teacher, business education teacher, I retired from the classroom in 2014, but I'm entering my 45th year as a coach, so I'm still involved with the kids at Hersey and still doing that. I'm enjoying it. Still feel like I'm making a difference in young people's lives, not just by teaching baseball, but how to calmly overcome obstacles and succeed as responsible adults. And that's what I've been doing. And that was my transformational journey.
Thank you, Kevin. Our next storyteller is Kim Hogan. Kim's most recent travel was to Scotland to visit her son, daughter-in-law, and granddaughter. She traveled with her husband, David, and daughter, Rachel, and they got home just 1 week ago. Her story tonight is titled The Second Act. Let's give a warm welcome to Kim.
Thank you, everyone. My transformational journey actually is occupationally related, somewhat like Kevin's, so I feel like I'm kind of on the good track here. But I'd like to share my story with you tonight. So a few years ago, I stood up here at a God's Honest Truth evening to tell the story of my first job as a registered nurse. I was 20 years old, and I was working at a big inner-city teaching hospital in Cleveland. And that is really where this journey begins, way back then. After Cleveland, David and I moved to Los Angeles for a few years. And then we came to Arlington Heights in 1985 after our oldest son was born. He was 4 months old then. At that time, I took a part-time evening shift job in the recovery room at Northwest Community, where I stayed for quite a long time. In the years that followed, our family grew to include 3 kids, and my world, it's kind of hard for me to look back on that now because my life today is so different. But my world really did not extend very far beyond Arlington Heights in those days. My life revolved around carpools and play dates. All the moms in the room can probably relate to that. I volunteered at my kids' schools. I was the room mom. I was a Cub Scout leader, a Boy Scout leader, any kind of scout leader you can think of. I taught Sunday school. I was a room mom. My family was my priority, and I loved those years, and I wouldn't change a minute of it. However, by the early 2000s, my kids were growing up. The oldest one was away at college, and I had been at NCH for 20 years. I had a great group of coworkers, nurses, are great friends, and a lot of them have remained to be, they're my lifelong friends. I've known them forever. I took good care of my patients. I was well respected. I did a good job. I knew everybody. I knew my way around. It was safe, it was predictable, and it was very comfortable. I only had a 5-minute drive to work. But by this point in my life, there was no getting around it. I was bored out of my mind. I was tired of asking the docs for orders when I knew what the next right thing was to do. I was tired of the restrictions, and I was tired of doing the same thing over and over and over again. And I couldn't imagine doing the same thing over and over and over again for the next 20 years. Now, ever since my youngest son, Ian, was born in 1993, I had been having some rather strange, intrusive thoughts about going back to school, going to graduate school, and becoming a nurse practitioner. Now, as a family nurse practitioner, I would be able to work alongside the physicians. I would diagnose, treat, manage, pretty much anything you would go to see your doctor for anyone from infants all the way up through old age. So, as important and as important as working as an RN was, this would be a quantum leap in responsibility for me. So at first, it was kind of easy to push these thoughts aside because I was very busy with my family. But by the time that baby was 12 years old and I was 49, I knew that, and I remember this very clearly, it's like if I don't do this thing before I turn 50, I am going to lose my nerve. So the other part of this is that my faith had developed more during those years. And at this point, I was also wondering, kind of, considering the thought that perhaps these thoughts I was having might be God's voice, speaking to me very gently and softly and sort of trying to steer me in a different direction. So I made a pretty conscious decision to follow that path and see where it would take me. So the first thing I did, I took a deep breath and I took a statistics course at Harper. I hadn't been in college in 25 years, mostly to see if my brain still worked. I sat, it was blowing out a lot of black smoke there at first, but the engine flipped over and it was good. I sat, it was so different from my earlier college experiences because I was right in the front row. The teacher was like, I was where Amy is, and the teacher's like right here, and I'm staring at him the whole time. Didn't take my eyes off of him. There was a girl that would sit next to me, and she had stick-on flowers on her calculator, and she'd sleep all through class. So I could hear her there. I couldn't look at her because I had to watch the teacher, but. So anyway, I finished that class, and I decided that my brain still worked. So I applied to UIC's master's graduate program in nursing to become a nurse practitioner, and I started my course in the fall of 2006. And all my nurse friends, most of them thought I was nuts to do something like this. Now, it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, but I absolutely loved it. The horizons of my world just went kaboom out that way. The semi-stay-at-home Arlington Heights mom became comfortable traveling downtown. I rode the L all over the place. I traveled to clinical sites from the Great Lakes Navy Base up in Gurnee, which was a fabulous experience for me, all the way down to the Cook County Hospital on the south side. I wrote papers late at night and on the weekends when I was at work, waiting for patients to come out of the OR. And I took my laptop on family vacations, getting up early to listen to lectures and to study so that I wouldn't fall behind. There was just no time off because there was just so much to learn. So that's kind of part one and part two of my journey. Now part three, maybe the most life-changing of all of this is that in my third and final year of school, this would have been January of 2009, through school I found out about an opportunity to travel to Haiti for a week to do some of my clinical time in a clinic in a small village called Gramont outside of Port-au-Prince. Now Haiti, as some of you may know, is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. More than half of the population lives below the World Bank's poverty line, has the highest infant, child, and maternal mortality rates in the Western Hemisphere. So one of the professors at UIC, her name's Susan Walsh, she's a pediatric nurse practitioner, had begun leading service learning trips with nurse practitioners and graduate students like myself to Gramont. And her intention initially was just to treat conditions there that affected women and children, but the clinic soon, almost overnight, became the main source of health care in that entire region. So it just that expanded as well. And by the time I met Sue, she had started a nonprofit organization, it's called Little by Little, to kind of formalize all of this. And then she also had partnered with Willem Charles, who's a Haitian man who grew up in Gramont, became a translator for ESPN, made a bunch of money, came back to Gramont, and wanted to improve the conditions in his home village. So he and Sue partnered together to kind of get this clinic going. And he also started a school and a church there as well. So I heard about this, I thought, wow, this sounds really cool. I think I'd like to do this. So I went home, talked to David about it. He was rightfully concerned about my safety because Haiti is not a safe place. It never has been, certainly not now. So we went to talk to Sue at her house in Glenview. I don't remember the conversation, but at the end of it, we both were reassured that I would be fine and I'd be well looked after. So I went ahead and signed up. So I met the rest of the team at Sue's house about a week before our trip. We packed a couple dozen suitcases. They had to weigh 50 pounds. We each had 2 of them that we were in charge of. They were full of medications, vitamins, miscellaneous medical supplies, all kinds of stuff, and big giant jars of peanut butter that in the evenings in the clinic we'd scoop out into souffle cups to pass out to the mothers who had malnourished children. So we got all our luggage together. We gathered at O'Hare a week later, caught an early morning flight to Miami, and then on to Port-au-Prince. And it was on the Port-au-Prince flight that's when the nerves really hit me. There was one other student, well, 2 other students there, other than me, and I really wasn't sure that I was going to be up for this. I had absolutely no idea what to expect. I'd heard all kinds of things about the clinic. Kind of seemed like it was going to be kind of crazy there. And would I be up to this? Would I be able to do this and take care of my patients? As a student, too, I was very aware of my inadequacies, and I was aware of all the stuff I didn't know. So it was very nerve-wracking. I was going to work with Sharon and Vanda, who were nurse practitioners that were going to be my preceptors, but I still had a lot of doubts. I remember looking out the window of the flight as we flew over Haiti. You fly over the Central Plateau. It's all deforested. It's all brown. Then you come in over Port-au-Prince. There's just nothing but hovels, cement hovels, streets stretching off to the horizon. There's diesel fumes everywhere. Crowds of people everywhere. And again, I'm looking, the plane lands on the runway, and I'm still thinking, well, I can't turn back now, but why am I here? So Willem met us with some of his men who worked for him, got our luggage together, piled them on these big luggage carts. We had to navigate them through the parking lot. Mike is here. He went to Haiti a few years after that with me, so he knows what I'm talking about. You had to kind of fend off the guys that hung around in the parking lot all day long. It was the way to earn money. They wanted to help you with your luggage. So the minute, I had to put my head down, try to keep my cart from tipping over, and fend them off. Because if they put a hand on your cart, they'd want money. So we managed that. We got over to the corner where Willem had these pickup trucks, loaded all the stuff on the pickup trucks, climbed up into the pickup trucks. We all rode in the back bed. And then we set off through Port-au-Prince to go to Gramont. We crawled through choked traffic, diesel fumes, people everywhere. There's no stoplights. There's no nothing. And it took us over an hour to travel 20-odd miles to get to the clinic. Yeah. Yeah, it was crazy. So, and I'm taking all this in. So we stayed at a guest house that Willem had owned. Next morning we get up, we have breakfast. I always like to walk to the clinic. It was about a little over a mile away. You'd go down across the riverbed, up a mountain. And because you could walk with the people who live there, and I was always outpaced by these beautiful, graceful women with 500 pounds of vegetables on their heads, and they'd kind of just go right on around me. Bonjour, bonjour, I can still hear their musical voices in my ears. And the kids, little kids are running up the hill to school, skipping up. A lot of them didn't have shoes on, or very bad, very poor footwear. So I finally make it up to the top. Around the corner, there's the clinic, and there's probably 150 people waiting in line for us. So that I'm like, wow. So those first few days really are a blur in my memory. The clinic itself was a large room with stations that were divided up with curtains, but there was absolutely really no privacy there. We had a pharmacy. We had a pharmacist with us, Leah, who was amazing. She's from Downers Grove. And by the end of the week, those pharmacy shelves would be empty. We would prescribe everything in there. But the clinic was, the windows, there were 2 big windows. They were wide open, no screens, no glass, no nothing. There's goats outside, there's kids outside, there's women, right outside the windows. It's just, a mass of people everywhere. We had no electricity. We had no x-rays. We had no CAT scans. We had no ultrasounds. We had no lab, except for some really simple tests we could do at the bedside. You hold the bottle up and, okay, I guess your blood sugar might be 500 or maybe not. I don't know. That's about all we had at our disposal. All we had was our exam skills and our stethoscopes, really. So the patients arrived, they were checked in, they waited on a bench. We had translators that worked with us, and they'd get the next person and bring it back behind the curtain. Then we had a lot of non-medical people with us who were amazing. They were bathing children and doing scabies treatments all day long. So the noise in that room was deafening from children screaming all day long. Now, as a student, I was accustomed, you observe, and you think, and you deliberate, and you write very long notes, and you take a very long time. And I was not really accustomed to making any kind of decisions at all. Well, that went out the window like in the first 5 minutes. The line between me and the providers got real blurry because there were just so many people to see. Our team would see about 200 people a day. Probably by the end of that week, we saw close to 1,000. So you had to really go. Anybody that we didn't get to see the first day, they would be first in line the next day. And people would sleep outside the clinic all night long and just wait their turn. We'd break an hour for lunch, which was rice, beans, and a piece of fish, which the same lunch that the school kids got. Everybody who came got vitamins, Tylenol, and deworming medicine. Sharon and I got used to seeing people with astronomically high blood pressures, non-healing wounds. We saw lots of pregnant women, diabetics, little kids with orange hair and really swollen bellies from malnutrition, and intestinal worms were a huge problem there. Lots of fungal infections. You never knew what would appear on the other side of the curtain. I learned to write the briefest of notes on a paper chart. It was called a dossier, and you had a square about that big. And then you had to move on. There were a few patients there that would always stay in my memory out of the many dozens, hundreds that I've seen over the years. There was the baby that probably had tetanus. We weren't sure, but all of us chipped in to send the baby and his mom in a taxi down to the General Hospital in Port-au-Prince. We never found out what happened to him. Sharon and I, there was another patient, a young mother that Sharon and I saw on our first day who died of tuberculosis 2 days after we saw her in the clinic. There was a 2-year-old who was brought in by her concerned father because she wasn't walking yet, and it was because she was so malnourished, her legs were swollen and they wouldn't hold her up. There was the boy, again, this is a father who carried his teenage son from a distant village. I think he had to travel a couple of days to get to us, carrying him because he was sick. That's all he said, he's sick. It turned out that the boy was wasting away from undiagnosed diabetes. So these, and then every pregnant woman that came in, we had a Doppler little stethoscope thing, and they could hear their baby's heartbeat for the first time, and that always brought big smiles. So that was always a pleasant thing to do. So these are only a few of the patients that I'll always remember. There are millions more in my mind. The clinic also was the most egalitarian place I've ever worked. And Western medicine, it's very hierarchical, everybody's got their place and blah, blah, blah. But if there was a complicated patient that came in, the whole clinic would stop. And we'd all put our heads together and use our expertise and figure out the best thing we could do for that person. Everybody worked together. No egos, no hierarchy. Nobody was more or less important than anybody else. It's the only place in my working life where I've really ever felt that way. If I needed something, before I knew it, someone wearing a miner's headlamp, because there's no electricity, was like rooting around in our storeroom looking for whatever it was I needed. And they would, by the grace of God, they'd always come up with it. Could be an IV, colostomy bag, some kind of a dressing. It was always there. We were all there for one reason, and that was to do the best we could for the person who was sitting in front of us. So I learned more that week than I had in the 3 previous years of my education. And the patience and the dignity, this is really the thing I truly carry away from Haiti. The patience and dignity with which many of my Haitian patients suffered really and bore great suffering, really impressed me very much. I returned to Haiti every year for the next 10 years as a provider, and we always brought students with us so that they could have the same experience learning that I had. Our trips ended with COVID. We had our bags packed. We were on the verge of walking on the airplane in March of 2020 when the world shut down. And then after that, the assassination of the president in 2021 resulted in Port-au-Prince being engulfed in violence, and it's not been safe for us to return there since. So I hope one day that I can go back. However, the point of my story is this. I believe with all my heart that the universe, God, the Holy Spirit, whatever you want to call it, was holding a door open for me way back when, and very quietly inviting me to walk through it. There wasn't any shouting, there were no fireworks, there was no blinking lights, nothing like that. There was just this urgency that I needed to try to do something else with my life. And if I had said thanks but no thanks, that would have been fine. There would have been no harm, no foul. But I'm so glad I did, because my life has never been the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Our final storyteller of the evening is Cynthia Goldsberry. The last place she traveled to is Amonami, Michigan, to visit family. You will hear her refer to it several times in her story and pronounce it correctly. And as she makes her way to the stage, she is sharing a story tonight titled History. Let's give Cynthia a warm welcome.
Okay, can everyone hear me? I hope so. And I am so sorry that I interrupted Laura. There you are. I just had to do that. Menominee, maroons, rah, 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 that kind of thing. Now, getting back to my story. When I saw that there was a need or a wanting for storytellers, I'm full of faith stories. But then I saw the word transformation. And when I saw that word, I thought, I would like to tell my story about transformation, because really that's where it all started for me. I also am going to be speaking a lot about externals, but they are relative to my theme. So, looking at what I titled my little talk is what? right, right. And so what I want to say about his history is in the front of my Bible, I have history written, History. And to me, that says his story. Therefore, the story I'm going to tell tonight is really his story. You're going to see a bit of my childhood history and teenage history. However, the real story is his story. I introduced myself as a Youper. And for you who do not know what a Youper is, there was an article that was written in the Wall Street Journal about 3 years ago about us. And we apparently are a bit apart and have our own culture. And it has to do with language, and it has to do with, I guess, kind of who we are. And as Youpers, you cannot be a sissy, because when we talk about the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, which is that which a Youper has come from, if you talk about the UP, you're talking about virtually 2 seasons. You're talking about winter, you're talking about summer, but you aren't saying much of anything about spring because it's still winter. And then when it gets to be fall, our leaves turn very quickly, and then the snow starts falling. So that is the climate in the UP. So you've got to be kind of tough to be a Youper. Menominee means wild rice in the Menominee Indian language. And Menominee is located just across the bridge from Marinette, Wisconsin. So that part of the country really should have been Wisconsin, but no, we're Michigan instead. The Lower Peninsula has always had, shall we see, many monetary values that we have not had. We are more primitive looking, and when you think of the UP, you have to picture. I'm thinking of Carol, you're telling us to close our eyes to picture, but just picture a beautiful, beautiful, rather primitive part of the country that is full, just full of trees of every size, every kind, and also water, rivers, ponds, and most especially Green Bay, because Menominee is located 60 miles north of Green Bay, but we are located on Green Bay, 23 miles across from our sand beach to Door County's sand beach is Door County, and then we start the bay from Green Bay, that goes all the way up to Mackinac Island. So we are a place where you wear scarves, always 2 pairs of mittens, snow pants for sure, and then galoshes, as we used to call them, big galoshes. Nothing cutesy about the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, nothing at all, not any kind of primpy style. I've mentioned that we really have 2 seasons, winter and summer. I've said a little bit about winter, but I'd like to say a bit more. I talked a little bit about our clothing. However, it does begin to snow before Thanksgiving. And we are white then, most of the winter. You don't find slush in Menominee. You simply find white snow that remains white because it continues to fall. And you see a lot of ice. And in that we are on the bay, we are frozen on that bay, and we can go across to Door County now on snowmobiles, but nothing like that when I was growing up. But what we could do when I was growing up, we could take our shovels to the bay and simply shovel a nice square where we could go ice skating. Also, ice boating, tobogganing, sledding. What have I left out? We are out of doors most of the time, rarely indoors. And that starts from the time we're about 4 years old. I'd like to say something about the streets in Menominee because they're quite interesting during the winter. The snow keeps falling and the snow is packed down. Then never would you find any salt there. What you see instead is sand. So there's the snow, there's the sand, there's the snow, it's packed down, and it has the most wonderful sound when you're driving or when you are walking in the street. It crackles, and I tend to forget that wonderful sound until I get home in the winter, where the snow sometimes covers the windows, the lower windows on homes, not all that often, but sometimes. And then you hear that crackle under your feet. That is a kind of music to a Yooper's ears. The other thing I would like to mention, that as a child, because of the snow banks, the heights of them, many times in walking to school, we couldn't walk on sidewalks because they were covered and hadn't been in any way shoveled. However, those high snowbanks could be leveled and packed down, and then we would climb up, Queen of the Mountain and King of the Mountain, and we would walk to Washington Grade School right at the top of all of that snow. And that was exciting. Didn't matter if you fell because you just fall onto a sidewalk full of snow, but it was fun, it was good, it was healthy. And we rarely got sick, and I think it's because we were out of doors all the time. That pretty well takes care of winter, but I'd like to address summer because we love our summers as we love our winters. Summers are at the beach. You are in your swimming suit most of the time because Menominee is located right on the water. The downtown is right on the water. There's a string of homes right on the water. And then, of course, we go inland with homes, but then coming straight between Menominee and Marinette is the Menominee River. So everywhere you are in Menominee, you are on the water, which is quite grand and glorious, especially when you get to your teen years. My family was not a church family. I had great parents. They were strict, but they were fun and fair, and we went on picnics on Sundays. When other people went to church, we were always on a picnic. My father was noted as being a wonderful swimmer, and so, of course, with all the water, we always, on Sunday, would be with this menu. My father loving steak and fried potatoes. We would go anywhere. There would be some kind of a stove so that we could have the fried potatoes and, of course, fried in bacon grease and the steak. And we would then have our picnic. My favorite place was a place about 30 miles north of Menominee called Wells Park. And I had the propensity for throwing up on the way there and on the way back, but who cared? Because of all of the fun you were going to have at Wells Park, which is a state park and never crowded, but what they did have that nowhere else have I seen this. They had a big slide in the water, So you walked maybe a few yards out into the water, then you climbed. It was quite high, and you climbed. And because my father was such a good swimmer, I always knew that once I came off, my father was there to just reach in and pick me up, and that took care of that. But what a thrill to get to the top and to come down this slide that was not uninteresting like that. It had all of these wonderful curves, and then you flew off it, and you flew into the water, and your father just scooped you up, and you climbed it all over again, then went home, got sick to your stomach on the way home, but you had had a grand and a glorious day. I mentioned that my family was not a church family. However, there were two experiences that I do remember when I entered a church. And the first and the second were both the Little Methodist Church in Menominee. And the first was being taken to Sunday school. I remember descending stairs, going into a cold basement, and then there was a big curtain that was dark brown, and I entered, and there was a table that was dark brown, and there were some kids who didn't look like they were having any fun at all or were about to, and I could not wait for that experience to end. That was my first, and I think would have been maybe in first or second grade at that time. The second one was when I would have been maybe about 5. I was in a sanctuary. I had never seen pews. I had never sat, therefore, on a pew. And the next thing I knew, there was a loud sound that came, obviously, from the organ. But following that, there came a succession of people who were dressed in these long black robes, and they were shouting out some kind of a song, and I was scared to death. I couldn't wait to get out of that church. Those were my two Methodist church experiences. Now, childhood. Obviously, it was exaltingly fun, happy, except for 3 things. No one else had to wear an undershirt in first, second, and third grade, and I did. And it was kind of woolly, and I hated it. And Mother thought very definitely it was a proper thing to do to keep me well and healthy. The other thing was the shoes that I needed to wear. My little first and second grade friends had some cute little shoes, and I had brown Oxfords that were called Girl Scout shoes. And I'm sure you can picture them, and you can understand why I longed for something other than Girl Scout shoes. So now we talk about my braids. My mother thought that a young girl, little girl, should have braids. She also thought that by the time you even got into junior high, you should have braids. And of course, that was very discouraging to me because other girls had cute little hairdos like those cute little shoes, and I had my Oxfords and I had my braids. And so by 8th grade, my braids were quite long. And I wish I had a picture. I would twirl them around my ears and put all kinds of bobby pins in. And then when I got tired of that And of course, your hearing would be somewhat impaired in Miss Herscheid's class. And so then I started putting them above my head. And of course, then that gave me some height. Because as you can see, I wasn't a great big tall gal when I was that age. Junior high, now 8th grade, still the braids, no Oxfords. In 5th grade, I opened a birthday gift, and there were my loafers. So out with the Girl Scout shoes. And in 4th grade, out with the undershirt. So now all I have left to deal with are my braids. When we went to junior high, adjacent to us was senior high. So we were a great big block just school, junior high, senior high, and that was the first time that I saw freshmen, sophomore, junior, and senior kids. And those of us who had just come up to junior high were oogling. We just watched everything that was going on as the girls especially walked back and forth and had these cute hairdos and had pleated skirts and saddle shoes and just looked great to us. And so, of course, what is a young girl hoping to do? She's looking at all of that and thinking, gee, I sure would like to look like that. And I told you I'm speaking of externals now. And at the end of 8th grade, my mother's father was ill in California in a veterans hospital, and she needed to leave to be with him for 2 weeks. During that time, I had seen something that was in the senior high newspaper, a little something across here that said, "Can you imagine that?" And then there was a whole list of things that had to do with senior high kids. But at the tail end, I see my name, and it says, "Can you imagine this? Cynthia Perry without her braids." Yes. So I talked to my mother periodically during those few weeks she was gone, and I begged her. I just begged her. And I read to her what had been in the senior high newspaper, and she said, "Well, honey, you go ahead and get them cut." And I was thrilled, and then she said to me, she didn't suggest any kind of what we called beauty shops, I guess you call them salons now, but she didn't suggest any beauty shop. She said, "You just go to Mr. Gipp, the barber, and he'll cut them off." So I went to Mr. Gipp, the barber, and I had my braids cut off. Now I take you to a freshman in high school. Freshman in high school. By this time, there are none of those things that were so distasteful. I've got a pink Angora sweater. I've got a banker's gray skirt. I've got my saddle shoes. My braids are gone. I've learned how to put pin curls into my hair and curl it so it looks real cute. I went out for cheerleading, senior cheerleading, that takes you through the 4 years from freshman to senior. I made cheerleading, got my white pleated skirt, my leather sweater, rah-rah, but everything was absolutely grand and glorious. And most especially, I learned to dance. And I loved, absolutely loved dancing. The jitterbug. Oh, the jitterbug. In fact, yes. It's good that drum isn't still beating that we heard in the very beginning of it. We heard some kind of, yes, Carol. Anyway, so things were good. And then the phone rang one day. Now, I'm a freshman. The phone rang, and it was a fellow by the name of Jim Ryan, who invited me to the senior prom. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'll have a formal, and I can dance. This is wonderful. We did have a very good time, and of course, he was much older than I. And got to turn my page here. And so we had this very good time, and that was followed by another phone call, and Jim asked me to go to choir rehearsal with him. I thought, choir rehearsal, and then I thought, which church? And he said, the Methodist church. I knew I could not go because I mentioned my parents were strict, and never was I allowed to go anywhere on a school night. And that was freshman through senior year. So I thanked him and said I wouldn't be able to go because I was unable to leave the house on school nights. And he said, and of course he was that much older than I, and he said, what if I asked your father? And I said, you? Ask my father? Yes. He said, maybe I could just come over to the house and ask him and tell him a bit about choir practice. And he did that. And my father said yes. I had 10 minutes to get from our house to the church, and then from the church back home. And Jim picked me up in a car the likes of which I had not ever seen. We had a white Chrysler, and this little car pulled up, and they had a rumble seat. And I had never seen a rumble seat before. And so I didn't do this the first time we went to choir rehearsal, but I did a couple of times thereafter. Of course, I asked to sit you know where, and I was not interested in sitting next to him in a passenger seat. I wanted that rumble seat. What I remember about the choir rehearsal in the Methodist Church is that there were about 15 people, and there were only 3 of us who were young. And the other people were primarily people from the farms on the outskirts of Menominee. And so Polly Snell was our egg lady. And the Callow boys, we always called them, but they were men, but the Callow boys had a dairy, and that, of course, was on a farm on the outskirts. I hadn't been with farm people before, and I was so comfortable with them. And they even had a kind of fragrance to them that I had not ever had the opportunity to sniff, so to speak. And I remember that. The other thing I remember was, and I saw this for the first time in here because I don't come to the chapel service, but it was our little table in the Methodist Church in remembrance of me. So this table, for me, is not a table. It is the most special of tables because it goes back to my teen years. I remember that. And the other thing that I remember is that we were practicing for Sunday's service, and we practiced an anthem that was called The Balm of Gilead. I didn't really know what a balm, not a bomb, but a balm of Gilead meant and learned. And then came Sunday morning. Sunday morning, we sang our anthem. I loved being in the choir. We sang our anthem, and then a large man, a wonderfully big man, very much like Jim Martin, got up in his long black robe that did not scare me, and he walked to the pulpit, and I heard words that I had never heard before. And this is my highest peak. I heard the Sermon on the Mount, and I'm 15 years old, and I'm all wrapped up in pink Angora sweaters and dancing and prancing and all of that kind of thing. And then I hear these words that I've never heard before. The pure in heart. What are the pure in heart? The poor in spirit. What does that mean? I know what poor means, but poor in spirit. What does that mean? Hunger and thirst after righteousness. Hunger and thirst after righteousness. My socks just came right off me, so to speak. I was, in that moment, so transformed because I was hearing words, and all of my life I had loved words. I'd been read to, loved books, etc. And these were words I had never heard. These were words that I never heard put together. And they were just glorious to me, and more than I could comprehend. And then I thought, well, who is he who is saying these things? What is he really saying? I have had nothing to do with any of that in my lifetime. And he was speaking to a part of me that I had never been aware of. That was my inner part. It is my inner part, and not in any way my outer part. And I, with that coming inside of me, wanted to know more. I started to thirst. I started to hunger. And I knew that I then needed to be in one place, and I needed to start reading one book. And so at 15, that was my transformation from the outer me to the inner me, to my heart. And I wanted to seek, and so those words, seek and find. I wanted to be a seeker, but I wanted to find. And I'm in my late 80s now, and I am still thirsty, and I still hunger, and I've never stopped seeking. And he has filled my life, so when I got up here and I said to you, I'm full of faith stories, but I wanted you to know about that transformation that went from outside, inside, and that is with me every step of the way. So that when I read those words later, fear not, for I am with you. And then I read Alpha and Omega. I am with you from the beginning. I am with you until the end. So that, for instance, when I had a breast removed and was being wheeled in, and I did not take someone with me because I did not want anyone with me. I had the one person I really wanted to be with exclusively, So as they were wheeling me into the operating room, and I am thinking, fear not. And the doors open, and there's all of this blinding light that comes from the operating room. And I think, Lord, you got here before I did. And then what I heard inwardly was, yes, I did. I do, and I always will. And when my son went off the top of a mountain in a car and was unrecognizable and was flown into Johns Hopkins, and nothing could be recognized except his feet. And therefore, when we were asked, does someone want to go to the operating room with him, just with the gurney? And my daughter-in-law said, Mom, I can't do it. I can't do it. He had the eyeball on the outside. He had no lips. He had a head. There was nothing recognizable. And I said, oh, I can. I can. And walking along with him, next to the gurney, I could look at him, and I didn't see all of that was so utterly and completely frightening and ugly. And in telling that to a friend of mine, a spiritual mentor, she said to me, that was because he had the covering of the Spirit, what she called the covering of the Spirit. And I believe it was a covering of the Spirit because he was my son, and I saw him as we were going to where I would leave him at the operating room. So what I say tonight is, I hope you're seeking like I am, because it's really exciting, isn't it? And I hope you're finding and having all of those faith experiences. We find him, and he gives himself to us. And he shows us the way. And those two words are with me time and time again. I want to be on the way, because the way isn't like any other way. It's even better than those roads in Menominee packed with snow and sand. It's the way. And the fear not. There is nothing to fear in any circumstance. I didn't ask for healings. I asked for just be with me as you always are and always will be. That's the way. And so I would like to close with Isaiah 43, 1 through 4, which is my very favorite. It's a little above the Sermon on the Mount. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Then I'm not going to use the mic. I always feel self-conscious with a mic. But now thus says the Lord, your Creator, and he who formed you, O Israel. Do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers, they will not overflow you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be scorched, nor will the flame burn you, for I am the Lord your God. You are precious in my sight. You are honored, and I love you. Do not fear. Amen. I love talking about the Lord, and I so appreciate all of you who are here. And where is Barb? Barb has been praying for me. So Barb, I thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank
Thanks
you
to
all
all
very
of our
much.
storytellers. Let's give them another round of applause. Kevin, Kim, Carolyn, Cynthia, thank you so much. Thank you for coming out. We'd love for you to join us for reception in the parlor, which is that direction. Thank you again.